Good morning, everybody. Today we are going to discuss Khushwant Singh's story, Karma. Khushwant Singh is a well-known novelist, short story writer, journalist and historian who earned fame for his well-known partition novel Train to Pakistan that was inspired by his experiences of the partition of the country in 1947. Khushwant Singh has also been an editor of Illustrated Weekly of India, which was India's preeminent news weekly, and his weekly newspaper column series with malice towards one and all was published in the leading Indian English language dailies. Singh occupies a space in the canon of Indian writing in English for his pungent comments, sharp criticism and witty humor. Karma is a much discussed term in the context of Indian philosophy, which literally means karma literally means deeds or the work done. The doctrine of karma means that in one's lifetime, one's deeds or actions in the present hour of life continue to have an effect in the next life or incarnation, and it also connotes the idea of destiny. A good deed or act pays us positively, whereas the evil deeds cause pain and make us suffer, having similarity with the Greek idea of nemesis. It suggests that justice is accorded to human beings taking consideration of their karmas. Khushwant Singh also portrays whether and how one's karma affects the lives of Sir Mohan Lal and Lakshmi in the story titled Karma. Originally published in 1989 in collected stories, Khushwant Singh's short story Karma is a bold statement on the colonized Indian society that offers an occasion for a candid introspection to those who took pride in blind imitation of foreign culture in colonial era. In his typical humorous narrative style, the author takes the reader back to the colonial pre-independence India, when many Western educated Indians prided themselves on their superior culture and demeanor. The author resurfaces the issues that relate the story to post-colonial theory of migration and the identity crisis that a migrant undergoes when he or she moves from one place to another in search of better opportunities or employment or education. The colonizers had imprinted indelible marks on Indian politics, language, culture and society, and the post-colonial India can hardly claim to be free from the impact of colonialism. The story Karma relates to the colonized-colonizer relations, where the author looks at the things through the lens of post-colonialism. The story takes shape within the territory or space of a railway platform and captures the psyche of a native Indian, Sir Mohan Lal, who cherishes blind admiration for the British masters and their ways of life. According to Homi Bhabha, who is a famous post-colonial critic, colonial mimicry is the desire for a reformed, recognizable other as a subject of a difference that is almost the same but not quite. Sir Mohan is an example of a mimic character who mimics Western culture, and he leaves no stone unturned to mimic English culture. The very title Sir that is added to his name is suggestive of the honors one received from the British colonizers, and this title of the Sir had given pride to those who received it. Khushwant Singh, as a realist and a humanist, exemplifies through the story how pride comes before the fall. For those Indians, such as Sir Mohan Lal, who looked down upon with contempt and despised their mother tongue during the British Raj. Karma is about an Anglophile Indian gentleman who is snobbish to adopt upper class English culture and lifestyle, displayed through his Oxford English and his distanced relationships with his unsophisticated Indian wife, who is an ordinary woman, unable to appreciate or adapt his aristocratic English manners and culture. The Western educated English or the English educated Indian Sir Mohan Lal, originally a native Indian, pretends to follow English culture and lifestyle but feels uncomfortable with his own culture, lifestyle and customs as opposed to his wife Lakshmi. Lachmi. Lakshmi. I am pronouncing Lakshmi as Lakshmi because the writer has also spelled the proper noun, her name, like this, as it is pronounced in Indian society, especially uneducated or illiterate society. Sir Mohan dislikes Lakshmi and ostracized her within and outside the boundary of home because she fails to adapt and import foreign culture and manners into her life. Within the landscape of a railway station, Khushwant Singh could portray how one's fate is determined by one's karma or one's actions or deeds. This is also a story about man-woman relationships in Indian socio-cultural milieu, especially in the backdrop of colonial India, where the writer has ironically captured and satirized at the collective frustrations of those Indians, of all the Indians, who were permeating between embracing the British culture and looking down upon with contempt their own culture, or looking down upon their own culture contemptibly. The author has also noticed the enormous difference between the socially rich and the poor classes existing in that era, and thrusts his satire at those people who treated their relatives with inequality and contempt. Again, Sir Mohan did not like Lakshmi's poor, illiterate relatives hanging about his bungalow, the bungalow which was a symbol of aristocracy during the colonial era. Singh also comments on Indian society where, governed by patriarchy, men suppresses women as inferior, never allowing them to be human beings with an equal status within the socio-familiar structures. So to Lakshmi, Sir Mohan is not simply her husband but her master, as if he has the ownership of the woman in the same way as Western colonizers enjoyed ownership over the Indian land in the colonial era. His wife does not mean a lot to him. She is not more than a servant to him, as he just ordered her about in anglicized Hindustani, and she obeyed passively. The encounter with a different culture, so-called superior or high culture, leaves Sir Mohan Lal to live a life of ambivalence and dilemma, of belonging neither here, that is to India, nor there, that is the West. The reader finds incongruities in his identity that swings between his snobbish imitation of Western high culture received from his education in the foreign country and his own indifferent outlook towards his native identity that he thinks to be inferior, dirty and vulgar in comparison to the West. In fact, Sir Mohan Lal is an arrogant Indian with Western education who feels contemptuous of his country's culture, manners and lifestyle. his imitation of foreign culture, and his condescending and supercilious attitude towards his wife sounds altogether disrespectful. Sir Mohan puts an air about his Oxford education and perfect English accent, only to be humiliated by a pair of ill-educated, drunken and boorish English soldiers, who not only dislodge him from his reserved berth in the first-class railway compartment, but first strike him on his face and then fling him out of the train. This traumatic experience shocks him into realizing his true identity. The story opens with Sir Mohanlal, a barrister, very conscious of his looks, that is manifested in how he smoothed his belial tie for the umpteenth time. Umpteenth time means multiple times, so many times. He was very conscious, and he was, seeing all the time in the mirror and looking at himself, his own image, whether he is wearing his tie properly or not, attracting others' attention. How his appearance means a lot to him is very much open, for the reader encounters him looking at his own image in the mirror of a first-class waiting room at the railway station, with an illusion of himself to be a distinguished, efficient, even handsome fellow, different from his dirty, vulgar countrymen, in his western suit imported from Savile Row, expensive cosmetics, Oxford education and cultural demeanour. The Made in India mirror, which is in a bad condition and does not reflect a first-class image of Sir Mohan, metaphorically mirrors his fate. Ironically, not only metaphorically but ironically also, mirrors his fate and future, reminding that he does not fit to be here in this first-class space which is reserved for the Englishmen in colonial India. The Made in India mirror is symbolically represented by the author with an air of satire upon native Indians like Sir Mohanlal with a dual identity who were mimicking Western culture. Sir Mohan, who does not see himself as being an Indian and pretends himself to be superior to all Indians, including his own wife Lakshmi, is ironically shown smiling with disdain at the mirror, with red oxide at its back come off at several places and long lines of translucent glass cut across its surface, not mirroring his image properly. Sir Mohan liked to be serviced by a lot of waiters or bearers around him to make him feel not simply comfortable but rather superior. His sense of superiority was a direct outcome of his 5 years abroad at the University of Oxford, where he was eminently well bred and had acquired the manners and attitudes of the upper classes. To him, Indian people's excitement, bustle and hurry were exhibitions of bad breeding, and he wanted everything tickety-boo and orderly. Sir Mohan would always speak English. Not only speak English, he will read English. He will read the Times because it always attracted attention. Always wore belial tie, while travelling with the thought that perhaps someone would recognize him with the tie. He drank scotch or whisky, which never failed with Englishmen, smoked English cigarettes in India. He used all those means as a medium to commune with his dear old England, and 5 years of glorious life there that was stamped on his personality for those 5 years of grey bags and gowns, of sports blazers and mixed doubles, of diners and nights that he spent overseas had been far more worthy to him than the 45 years in India with his dirty, vulgar countrymen, with sordid details of the road to success, with old Lakshmi smelling of sweat and raw onions. He even disliked Lakshmi's relatives because they were uneducated and poor. He always projected himself as powerful as the British colonizers in India on account of the linguistic supremacy he enjoyed, and his preference for English language is evident here. I quote here an extract from the story. He rarely spoke Hindustani. When he did, it was like an Englishman's. Only the very necessary words and properly anglicized. But he fancied his English finished and refined at no less a place than the University of Oxford. He was fond of conversation, and like a cultured Englishman, he could talk on almost any subject: books, politics, people. How frequently had he heard English people say that he spoke like an Englishman? Unquote. Thus, Sir Mohanlal feels ashamed to be an Indian and pretends to be a part of Western culture by speaking Oxford English with an anglicized accent, reading an English newspaper, imitating Western dressing style, and that style is specially displayed through his balliol tie, spending time drinking scotch in the first class waiting room at the railway station, and travelling in the first class compartment of the train, seeking an English companion instead of his own wife's company. Now, Lakshmi, as opposed to Sir Mohan's complacent choice of the closed, alien space of the first class railway waiting room, his wife Lakshmi, a simple native Indian woman, is happy with her open Indian territory of the railway platform, where she sits on a steel trunk, chewing betel leaf and fanning herself with a newspaper. She is a typically traditional Indian woman who wore an ordinary dirty white sari with a red border. She knows no English but is quite comfortable with her colloquial Indian language and Indian food. She carries her betel leaf case and brass stuffing carrier, from which she took out a bundle of cramped chapatis and some mango pickle to eat. She does not mind having her meals on the platform publicly, licking the stone of the pickle, or to go to the public tap to rinse her mouth and hands, and to dry her mouth and hands with the loose end of her sari. She was simple-hearted enough to fondly converse with and enjoy the company of an ordinary coolie brother on the railway platform unhesitatingly, irrespective of any consciousness or pretensions regarding social status, thus representing the essence of Indian cultural values amid colonial influences in her surroundings. Lakshmi represents Indian culture, and through her character, the writer creates a contrast to Sir Mohan, who is portrayed as an other in Indian society. Quite different from ordinary Indians, as he tried to be something he was not. He was neither a born Englishman nor his Western education make him an Englishman, and therefore he stands rejected by both cultures, Indian as well as Western. The story executes the crisis of identity in Sir Mohan's act of imitation of Western culture. Sir Mohan thinks himself superior to ordinary Indians and has abandoned his culture in favor of foreign ethos, but his assumed identity does not get acceptance in Indian society. Out of his cultural arrogance, he chooses to travel first class away from not only other Indians but his own wife. Lakshmi is quite comfortable in her Indian surroundings and is least interested in changing her Indian way of life by adopting foreign culture and manners. She feels at home and happy on the railway platform, with the coolie having her home cooked Indian food, chewing bitter leaves and travelling in my Zanana interclass compartment of the train. The author constitutes in her person the post-colonial image of Indian society without any incongruities, dilemmas or ambivalences of the hybrid cultural identity against her husband, who is a prototype of an act of imitation and mimicry of Western lifestyle and high culture, and snobbishly pretends to shadow his own inferior ambivalent native identity. Sir Mohan felt proud to have boarded the first class compartment of the train, his heart visualizing the prospect of an impressive conversation with some English officers travelling along him in the train, leaving his wife alone to travel in the Zanana interclass. But alas, it could not happen. It could not materialize. As Sir Mohan saw two Indian soldiers looking in all the compartments for room, his face lit up at the thought of talking to English people, and he decided to welcome them, though they were entitled to travel only second class. Ironically, the two soldiers misbehaved with Sir Mohan Lal and abused him by calling him a nigger, because to them he was an Indian who is not entitled to travel in the first class compartment on account of the color of his skin. Dismissing all his pleas, they shouted at him and threw him out of the train with all his belongings, including the prestigious newspaper The Times, leaving Sir Mohan humiliated and livid with rage. Thus he gets punished for his karma, that is, for belittling his own culture and country. The two soldiers in the train, whom he thought commendable for their Englishness, mistreated him as a worthless Indian and kicked him out of the train, making him feel powerless and humiliated, perhaps dismantling his fascination for English culture and education that made him feel distinguished and powerful. But his wife Lakshmi does not encounter such humiliation. She is quite easy and comfortable in the interclass Zanana compartment. It is worth noticeable that Sir Mohan has allotted a subservient position to her wife at home as well as outside. He sees no virtue in being an Indian and therefore does not consider his wife deserving enough or equal enough to travel with him, neither as a woman nor as a human being. She does not qualify to his Western standards to accompany him in the first class compartment for being a native, uncivilized Indian who stands out as an inferior to him. But at the end of the story, Sir Mohan is left alone on the platform as the train moves off with the two British soldiers and his wife Lakshmi, as well suggesting that should an individual like him tries to exchange the values and virtues of his own culture, manners and morals, he would belong nowhere, except that his identity is nullified, leaving his complacency wounded It is next to impossible to transform one's own identity into something that never belongs to one's own roots and culture. Sir Mohan, smiling at the mirror with an air of pity and patronage, smiling at the mirror with an air of pity and patronage, feels uncomfortable with Indian space, territory, culture, and lifestyle in his imported appearance, in the neat and perfect attire borrowed from the foreign land and refined with his habit of smoothing his burial tie for the umpteenth time. The self-conscious Western incarnation of Sir Mohan evokes humor and irony when he makes an effort to assimilate Western identity in his person through anglicized Hindustani, failing to merge with Indian landscape. The irony intensifies with the appearance of Lady Lal on the scene. Lady Lal, Lakshmi, on the scene, uncivilized, neglected, undermined, suppressed, marginalized, and dominated. Though she is an embodiment of down-to-earth Indian traditions, manners and morals and cultural values, Lakshmi prefers to be an independent self without any complaints for her superior husband or any illusions about her native identity. She is candid enough to confess the colonial borderline that separates her from her husband, Sir Mohan. He travels first class. He is a vizier and a barrister and meets many officers and Englishmen in the trains. And I am only a native woman. I can't understand English and don't know their ways, so I keep to my zanana interclass. Lakshmi confesses, and confronting Sir Mohan's colonial pride and prejudice without any oscillation, remains unchanged and sticks to her native identity with confidence. Sir Mohan's personality is constituted of those values, labels, roles, stereotypes, or other preconceived notions of superior individual who fits well within the definition of the colonial framework of socio-cultural supremacy and authority. The supremacy and authority that was given to him by language and appearance, foreign language and foreign appearance. His hybrid identity is an example of a split personality who switched over to arbitrarily attributed categories of cultural refinement that denied the true self for the foreign values. The denial of the self and hankering after the other makes Sir Mohan an alienated self in his own world, in his own surroundings, or in his own space, because he allowed his other self to determine and define his native identity. Lacan, a psychoanalyst, post-colonial psychoanalyst critic, has observed that the effect of mimicry is camouflage. Camouflage is covering yourself with something which hides your true self. The effect of mimicry is camouflage. It is not a question of harmonizing with the background, but against a mottled background. Alienated from his country, his own wife, his people, his own culture, Sir Mohan Lal is desperate to become what he is not in his own land, but suffers crisis because those English people whom he thinks himself to be a part of his territory throw him away from their space to which he never belonged, nor could he hold any claim to that on account of his Indian nativity. Ironically, Sir Mohan Lal is asked to get out of his compartment in anglicized Hindi in spite of his protest in his Oxford accent, thrusting him out of his long cherished Oxford stupor. The illusion of the times and the tie is shattered. He could belong neither to the Balliol tie nor to the Beetle, neither to the first class nor to the interclass, with a nowhere identity and nowhere belonging. The inclusion of the English newspaper The Times in the narrative on the part of the author shows that the author is intelligent and witty enough to use it as a metaphor and symbol of superiority and authority of the Western culture that ironically gets rejected as soon as the newspaper is thrown out by the soldiers, who themselves are part and parcel of the same so-called superior civilized culture, yet unable to maintain the civilized behavior. The author satirizes Sir Mohan's attempts to transform his native identity at the cost of his own nationality and civilization, because all his endeavors to change himself completely are shattered towards the end of the story. His illusions are dispelled as he is shown the mirror by the Englishman whose culture he has been mimicking, so far forgetting his roots in favor of cultural habits of English society. In accordance with Indian philosophy, the concept of karma is interpreted, as I told you at the beginning, as the sum total of one's actions, good or bad. Good deeds are always rewarded, while the bad deeds pay for the wrongdoing. Justice is awarded in this story also according to one's karma, and Sir Mohan Lal and Lakshmi share their karma attached to the Indian thought as it is determined by their previous actions. Sir Mohan accumulates bad karma as he embraced English culture with pride, and this sin of embracing foreign culture was destined to be punished. He receives a good lesson on his strange journey. Contrarily, Lakshmi is attuned to good self and remains happy. The story demonstrates in its attribution of justice that the karmas of Sir Mohan and Lakshmi reaped at the end of their journey the fruits of their respective actions or deeds. To conclude, Khushwant Singh as a post-colonial Indian writer exhibits mimicry and cultural in-betweenness as anti-colonial dictates to voice his opinion against Western hegemony. Locating the cultural identity of the native Indians in Lakshmi, he dislocates the supremacy of English culture and language through the satiric representation of Sir Mohan's mimicry of foreign culture. He deconstructs the linguistic and cultural hegemony of the West through an act of code switching and code mixing between Indian vernacular expressions. Lakshmi, as I discussed earlier, is a very good example of an Indian vernacular expression. The way in certain regions of India the word Lakshmi is pronounced, and English in his literary discourse in his short story. Singh decolonizes the Western outlook through the portrayal of Sir Mohan and propounds the idea that lest one forgets the dangers of mimicking the West at the cost of one's roots, one becomes a butt of ridicule and a comic figure to be derided by the Western people. Now, since I had earlier given you an assignment to read the story first, I hope you must have read the story. Now read the analysis which I am attaching to this video and then attempt your question answers. Thank you very much.